Considering the sexy scenes he's read, totally 18 plus. Don't you know who you're talking to?
Daddy. Strength to hold in what is trying to get out. Okay. Temptation.
He lowers himself down between my legs and watches me closely as he pushes himself inside me. I cry out, moaning with pleasure, uncaring how feral and out of control I sound. Kyle moves slowly at first, kissing me so softly that I feel like I might explode. Then he pulls back and slams into me hard.
I shall save you all from spiders. I'm an expert trapper and releaser. That's so sweet that you release them. I murder them.
Good evening. Good to see you all. I hope everyone's doing well. I trust that you've had a decent weekend, whatever that has involved. It's been rigid cold here. It's snowing all the time. I'm over it. I'm done. Dragon Rose, good job getting first place. Arachna, hello. Stump Mama's Mama getting second place. Well done. Sorry, almost first. We don't call it second. You're just almost first. That's all it needs to be. Yes. Got this really annoying frog in my throat tonight. I don't know why. Hibernation weather? Yeah, could be. Could be. But we did manage to get out of the house last night. We went to one of our ticketed, season ticket basketball games. So that was good. We won, which made it even better. So that was a good time. No complaints there. If the buses that shuttle from like an off-site parking lot to the arena hadn't been running, we probably would not have gone. Because then we'd have to find parking on our own and then hike to wherever, from there to where we needed to be. And it just would have been... It would have been too cold. And today was... Like, yesterday was technically warmer than what it is today. I just realized the chat was... I don't even know why I have a chat on my screen, honestly. I realize it's helpful for the folks that are watching the video later, but I don't know. Does anyone actually read it, though? If anyone's watching the VOD, they're probably not paying attention to the chat, They're just listening to the book, doing something else, maybe checking the screen every once in a while, but I doubt they're reading the chat. Anyway, just my inner thoughts. It's 1 Fahrenheit here, supposed to drop to -3 tonight. It's currently -12 right now, for me. Plus whatever the wind chill is. So that's great. Well, I got you both beat. I got you both beat, okay? It's -12. And I'm not happy about it. I am happy, though, to show you your puzzle. I calmed down on the puzzle tonight. It's a lot of the same color, but it's only like 380 pieces. Hi, Killa. I'm lurking on your stream. Killa is streaming right now as well. I think you switched to Hunt Showdown. Yes, you did. Hunt Showdown. I'll just do a quick emoji in her chat. That way she sees that I see that she sees that I see her. You know, all that good stuff. But anyway, yes. -12. Not happy. I hate winter. But I'm that annoying person that I don't like winter because it gets frigid cold. But look at me. Do I look like I have a tan? No. So therefore, it's probably a safe bet that I burn in too much sunlight. And if you thought that, you would be correct, because I do. So, where does one live that doesn't have severe heat or a ridiculous amount of snow and cold? Where do you go? Please tell me, because I don't know. Please, help. Help me. Somebody. I don't know where this magical place is, but it's not here. I have no idea. Me neither. I think I just need to live in an indoor, all-inclusive resort. Yeah. I think that would do it. Yep. Macca's. What's up, man? Good to see you. Haven't seen you in a hot minute. We're on chapter 12, everybody. It's crazy. Chapter 12. And then we switch over to Obsidian's Fall, Kay's newest book. So that'll be a treat for us. But for now, we finish Honest Deceit. Chapter 12 lands us on page 175 in the printed copy. There's a picture here. I'm trying to figure out... There's a character here, and I'm not sure who it is yet. Let me get my fingers out of the way. It's kind of got a Clint Eastwood look on his face. Lady K's book will be in my Amazon order tomorrow. Oh, that's really nice, Mama's Mama. Thanks for doing that. That's great. I know you're getting it just because it's steamy. I know you like that kind of thing. No secrets here, you can tell me. It's okay. I won't tell anybody. By the way, this is being recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube. But I will not physically tell anybody that you like steamy books. Right. Should we read? I think we should. Let's do that. Okay. Shh, don't tell. Yep. Chapter 12 is called Mr. Gibbs. And that's it. That's all you need to know. I'm gonna turn down the music a little bit in my head. Just a touch. Just a tiny bit. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Chapter 12. The knocking on the door got louder and louder. David tried to open the door to Chris's house, but it was locked. He turned around to look at his car parked on the side of the road. He then yelled out his name and heard a reply back. "Come to the back, David." David walked to the side of the house and went through the small path to the back, where there was a big silo. He heard metal sounds. He walked inside apprehensively and saw Chris wearing only his denim, holding a wrench with a cigarette in his mouth. "You have a Ferrari and a Porsche?" David asked impressively. "Yeah. There's something wrong with the transmission of my little baby, though," Chris replied as he leaned under the bonnet and started working on the car again, then asked, "What's up?" "Sorry." All better. David got closer to try and get his attention. "Look, man, Donnie went MIA on us. He left a message to suspend everything. I understand if you spent some of the money, but I'll need to get whatever is left back." "No can do, mate," Chris said as he kept working on the car. "I spent it all." "What? It's only been a few weeks." Chris got his head out from under the bonnet and leaned against it. "David, how much do you think this car costs?" He threw a cigarette on the floor and stepped on it. "I don't know. $100K, maybe?" $300,000. How do you think I make that money?" "I don't know. By doing what I asked you to do?" "Do you remember those two girls that you saw when you came by the other day? Those weren't just girls. Those girls are in prison now. I can't tell you how I do what I do, or what I found out about Donnie and his mother, but the money you gave me was just a small start. I spent it all the first week. If you can hang around for an hour, I'll show you what I mean. I need to run some errands, and I want you to come with me." David shook his head equivocally. He was not convinced of what Chris just said, but he walked around the car and sat inside. "That's a nice car, Chris. Why don't you take it to get it fixed in a garage or something?" "I'd never let anyone touch my cars," Chris replied as he wiped his hands with a piece of cloth. "Hang around. There's beer in the fridge. I'm gonna go take a shower, and then we'll go." The Corvette was roaring through the roads, declaring its power to the other cars as David was gripping the handle of the passenger door. "Can you slow down? No wonder your cars break down. Where are we going anyway?" "Oh, hi, Kay. Hey, y'all. Sorry I'm late. Technical difficulties." "No worries. A Lady K arrives exactly when a Lady K arrives. And that is all there is to it." "We're almost there. I want to introduce you to my new partner," Chris said as he kept driving. The roads became more familiar to David. Finally, they stopped in front of a place that David had been to many times. Wouldn't it be funny if the new partner was Mike? "I'm here, kind of. Our internet's cutting out so bad." "Yeah, I saw your message, stepmom. I'm really sorry about that. That stinks." "Get it figured out." "Get on it." "Jeez." Gemma, thank you for the lurk. Excuse me. "I don't think I can drink right now, Chris. It's so frustrating. They just fixed it." "Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, I know that they just fixed it, but that's ridiculous," David said as he saw Charlie's bar. "How do you know about this place anyway?" "I am Richard's partner now. Come." You'll see the changes. Okay, so he's not Mike's partner. Okay. That makes sense. That would have been a bit weird. As they both walked in, David immediately noticed the difference. This place used to be quiet, with nobody around but the team when they celebrated a win. There was a new karaoke machine, extra tables, the lighting was different, and the place was thriving. We lost the internet for about 4 hours today, weather related with our internet provider. It was wide-ranged outage. Jeez. That stinks. Our internet is underground, so it would take a lot to lose ours, which I'm super grateful for, but I realize not everybody's in that boat. What the hell happened here? David whispered. Hey, Chrissy boy. Richard yelled as he saw Chris walking in. What you been up to? Nothing new, dude. How have you been? This is David. David, how are you, man? I haven't seen your team in a long time. Oh, you know each other, Chris exclaimed. David was speechless and very confused as he shook Richard's hand. Even Richard looked different. He was happier as he was pouring the drinks for customers. He was more talkative compared to his old self when he was standing behind the bar cleaning the glasses that hadn't been used. The conversation that followed between Chris and Richard was all business related, talking about renovations and costs, discussing improved income in the last few weeks and the advertisements that had been happening around the area. Something did not make sense to David. Why would Chris be Richard's partner in the bar where the team used to celebrate their wins? And why did he intentionally bring him there and pretend that he did not know they knew each other? So, what's the deal? David asked as they walked out of the bar to the car. The deal with what? Chris replied sarcastically. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. How do you know Richard? And how did you become his partner? Those renovation costs more than $150,000. I'm sure you have more than that saved away. You're right. They did. And you're wrong. I don't save money. Okay, so you're gonna tell me? Or take me back to my car? Chris chuckled. No, I'm gonna show you the big whale. We're going to the airport. David got in the car reluctantly, but curious to find out exactly what Chris had been up to in the past few weeks. He thought there was no point in asking who they were going to meet. You didn't bring me here haphazardly, did you? David had to ask the question. You're right, Chris briefly replied. So, why did you bring me here? To find out who killed Catherine? Isn't that what you paid me for? Okay, Chris, I have a question. Obviously, you are very good at what you do, and I knew that already. That's why I recommended you. But if your suspicions extend that far, how come you didn't suspect me, for example? Now, David, you know I never fail in my investigations. And if you were the one who did it, I'd be the last one you would hire. He briefly paused and looked at David. He felt sorry for the man sitting in the passenger seat. Look, man, we've been friends since we were kids. I find things others can't, because I look in places others don't. Remember those 2 girls you saw at my house? They are both in jail now. I was hired to investigate a murder, and they were both suspects. They didn't confess, and there was no evidence against them. The only way they confessed was during sex. That's all I can tell you for now, but trust me. Let me do my job properly. I am close. We're going to meet a man. I do need you to be quiet the entire time. The announcements at the airport cleared David's brain from all assumptions. It was tiring trying to figure out how Chris thought or worked. He thought it was better to be amongst the audience watching a professional play than miss out on the entire game. It's always a good game when the players on your team are in control, and Chris seemed to know what he was doing. Not long after their arrival at the airport, Chris left David behind and walked at a fast pace towards a skinny, tall old man wearing a white suit. He was clean-shaven with gray hair combed back. Behind him, there was a muscly man holding a briefcase. He looked like he had a personal assistant or bodyguard. Although David was a few feet away, he could hear the whole conversation. Mr. Gibbs, hope you had a nice flight. We spoke on the phone. I'm Chris. Mr. Gibbs didn't say a word. Instead, he was studying Chris from top to bottom. He didn't seem impressed with the denim jeans and the casual t-shirt. Okay, follow me, Mr. Gibbs said and started walking immediately. His bodyguard followed and got close to Chris to try and intimidate him. Chris smiled and whispered, "Does he give you time to get laid? I think you need it, mate." The two walked to the VIP lounge. David followed. David was more confused than ever. It takes a lot to confuse a lawyer. And Chris has been puzzling him with every action and word he's done or said. The VIP lounge had only 2 people sitting in the corner. It was decorated in a stylish and sophisticated manner with elegant furnishings and artwork on the wall. The atmosphere was quiet and relaxed, except inside David's chest. He still did not understand what was going on, but followed Chris's instructions and remained quiet. Mr. Gibbs sat down on the sofa and gestured to his bodyguard to give him the briefcase. He punched the code and opened the briefcase. He turned it around to show Chris its contents. It was full of money. He kept it in Chris's direction for a few seconds, then turned it back, closed it, locked it up, and gave it to his bodyguard. "What do you have for me?" he asked. Chris put his hand in his jacket pocket and got out a folded piece of paper. He gave it to Mr. Gibbs. David tried to get a glance but couldn't, but he could see the change in Mr. Gibbs's facial expressions. "Where is the rest?" he asked with an angry tone. "I will send you everything once you sign my contract, and I get the briefcase," Chris said as he got out a different piece of paper and handed it over to Mr. Gibbs, who signed it without even looking at it. He nodded his head to his bodyguard to give him the briefcase. At the same time, Chris got his phone out and sent an email with attached documents to Mr. Gibbs. They both stood up, shook hands, and then Chris and David left the VIP lounge. Why would he not question who this David guy is? Like, just some other dude crashing their party? Curious. Chris was speeding down the road, swerving in and out of lanes and making sharp turns at high speed. David was sitting in the passenger seat, gripping the armrest tightly and looking nervously out the window. The car was moving so fast that the scenery outside was a blur, and the wind was whipping through the open windows. Chris was laughing and whooping with excitement, seemingly enjoying the thrill of the fast drive. David, on the other hand, looked scared and tense, but he couldn't help but ask the question. "So, are you going to tell me who that was?" Chris continued to accelerate, pushing the car to its limits and ignoring traffic signals and other cars on the road. That, my friend, is a multimillionaire. He also happens to be Donnie's uncle, who was left out of his life insurance that Catherine got for herself. Also, there's a big chance that she was the one that killed her husband. As the car pulled over in front of Chris's house, David got out and leaned against the passenger open window. Going on another errand? I've got a date, my friend. I'll be in touch. The car sped up and disappeared as it turned around the corner. And that's the end of chapter 12. Hi, Jen. Good to see you. That was not that's not where I was expecting the chapter to finish, but there it is. The chapter's over. So I'm trying to put my head around this. Goes to the airport to meet up with this old guy. Turns out to be Donnie's uncle. Hands him pictures, maybe, in exchange for a payment. And there's a suspicion that he knows that Donnie's mother killed his father, and then just bails. Okay. Glad to be back. I am glad you are back. I missed you. I hope you're doing okay. That is interesting. Well, instead of wasting more brain cells on trying to figure out what, why, and where, and all that good stuff, we're just going to carry on with chapter 13. Yep, and then after chapter 13, I will do some push-ups because I owe some. And then we'll keep going. So chapter 13 starts on page 187, and it's called The Night is Long. When the night is gone. Boom, boom. Okay. Calm down. Oh, there's another picture, of course, but it's like a silhouette of a cowboy. I can only assume it's Mike. Missed you too, preparing for the snowstorm. I already got mine. I don't know how many inches of snow we got, but it was a lot. And it's negative 12 still outside right now. Loving that. I had to go outside today too and deal with some stuff. So great. All right. Chapter 13. The luxurious hotel lobby had a grand, spacious room with high ceilings and large windows. The lobby was decorated with elegant furnishings, plush sofas and armchairs, marble flooring, and sparkling chandeliers. There was a large reception desk, where friendly and attentive staff were available to assist guests with check-in and other needs. Mad Locust, hello. Perfect weather to sit inside with a hot drink and a book. Indeed. Dang, I'm curious if it'll stay. Not common here. Well, I hope not for your sake. You can have some of mine if you like. The lobby had a variety of amenities. A bar where guests were ordering drinks and snacks. A fireplace where some were relaxing and warming up. The business center was filled with computers and other office equipment, but it was almost always empty. The atmosphere in the lobby was quiet and relaxed, with a sense of sophistication and luxury. The guests in the lobby were dressed in stylish and fashionable clothing, and they were always chatting with each other, reading a book or checking their phones. But most of all, The pianist playing soothing music gave Donnie a sense of comfort. "Good morning, Mr. Jackson. How are you doing today?" The woman at the front desk greeted him before he reached the front desk. "I'm great, Stacy. Any messages for me?" "No, sir. No messages." He went and sat near the fireplace where he usually sat every morning for the last few weeks. He got his book out and started reading. But before long, he felt his phone vibrating. He got it out of his pocket and read the notification that the transaction on the hotel bill was declined. He experienced a sudden and intense feeling of panic. He felt anxious and worried about his financial situation, especially after being carefree for several weeks. He looked at the hotel receptionist, and although she was not looking at him, he felt embarrassed and humiliated that his card was declined. He sat forward and thought about contacting Rachel. He stood up and began pacing back and forth, feeling overwhelmed by the situation. A feeling that he never had before. Money was the only thing he never had to worry about. He tried to reach Rachel on the phone, but couldn't. He felt frustrated and anxious. He kept trying to call repeatedly, dialing her number and listening to the busy signal or voicemail message. He then sent a text message after leaving 2 voicemails, hoping to get a response. He became more and more impatient and agitated. He felt more isolated and alone. He ultimately gave up and walked back to the receptionist, who noticed him and put a smile on her face. "I'm sorry, Stacy. I just have a quick question. I got a notification that the bank bill was declined. I would have thought you would tell me if that were the case, right?" "That's right, Mr. Jackson. The payments haven't been going through for about a week. The manager instructed us not to say anything because we know you, and we know you would eventually take care of it." "Oh, no. You should have told me," Donnie said as he grabbed his wallet from his back pocket and got out a bunch of cards. Here, try this one, please." Stacy took the card, and while she was entering the information, he kept checking his phone, hoping for a response from Rachel, without any luck. "I'm sorry, that's not good either." Without saying a word, he gave her 3 more cards. "Try them all, please." He realized it was not just a card issue, but he hopelessly tried. He apologized and promised he would take care of it. Suddenly, the lobby did not give him the comfort he was hoping for. He went up to his suite. His luxurious suite contained a large and spacious room with large windows and offered stunning views of the surrounding area. The suite had lavish sofas, armchairs, and rich wood accents. It had a king-size bed with opulent linens, a large flat-screen TV, and a minibar stocked with snacks and drinks. He went to the separate living area with a fireplace and comfortable seating. "Rampage, what's up, sir?" "Mr. Rhino. I saw your message in Discord. I hope it's a swift process for you. We're ramping up to do something very similar, hopefully, in the next few months, so I'm feeling what you're feeling." He sat down and was out of ideas. "Doing good, just resting. Movement sucks." Yeah, it does. So does packing. He thought about calling his office, but he did not want to talk to anybody but Rachel. While he was drowning in his thoughts, a knock on the door made his head turn. He walked to the suite door and looked through the people. It was the hotel manager and another person standing next to him that he did not recognize. He did not recognize. He opened the door in apprehension. The manager was very polite to Donnie, but he firmly asked him what was going on. It wasn't simply a matter of a few payments for a regular room, it was almost a week for the biggest suite in the hotel. "Mr. Jackson," he said, "you're a valuable customer, and we appreciate your stay with us. It was brought to my attention that there was a payment issue. I just want to make sure you are okay, but I also have to take care of the hotel and do what's in its best interest." No, I understand. I'm just waiting for a phone call, and it will be all sorted today. As a matter of fact, I will get in my car now and resolve the issue." Donnie walked out to the corridor and shut the door behind him. He walked with the manager and the other person to the elevator. The time he spent in the elevator felt so long. He felt embarrassed. He sensed that he was being escorted out, although he wasn't. He couldn't face the humiliation of staying for one more second in that hotel. The manager tried to break the silence. He said out of guilt, "Mr. Jackson, if you would like to downgrade to a smaller room, perhaps, we can definitely do that." Donnie felt offended. There will be no need for that. He hastily exited the elevator once it reached the lobby and walked across to the entrance without stopping. He looked at the valet, who immediately recognized him and rushed to get his car. He jumped in and drove off. As he drove, his mind began to wander, and he started thinking. The more he thought, the more frustrated, increasingly distracted and anxious he became. He failed to notice the stop sign at the intersection ahead, and he ran it, narrowly avoiding a collision with another car. The other driver honked their horn and yelled. He realized that his distraction had nearly caused an accident. Feeling shaken, he pulled over to the side of the road to collect his thoughts. He took a few deep breaths and tried to focus on the present moment. He checked his phone, hoping for a reply from Rachel. He gave his indicator and started driving again. The line at the bank was long, and he was visibly anxious, fidgeting with his hands and looking around nervously. He kept checking his phone. The people around Donnie could see he was anxious, and they gave him a wide berth, as if they were avoiding him. The tellers at the bank also seemed to sense his anxiety. As the line inched forward, Donnie became more and more agitated. He started to tap his foot impatiently, and he began to mutter to himself under his breath. He seemed to be on edge. Finally, he reached the front of the line and approached the teller. My card, they aren't working," he said quickly without answering her greeting. Okay, let me find out what the problem is," she said as she took his card and started punching numbers on her computer. She mumbled something and kept punching more numbers. She seemed to be repeating the process again. Donnie couldn't wait any longer. "What's the problem?" he asked rudely. "I don't know, Mr. Jackson, but it seems like your credit cards are all overdrawn and no payment has been made in a long time," she said nervously. My secretary, girlfriend, makes all the payments, and she is very punctual. I'm pretty sure she's made all the payments. Please, double check." She just shook her head, not knowing what to say. He reached out under the glass window, grabbed the card, and left the bank. He went to the car, tried calling Rachel again, and left a voicemail. He entered the address of his office and started driving down the highway when he realized that he was running low on gas. He looked at the gas gauge and saw that it was nearly empty. He panicked, realizing that he didn't have any money for gas. He pulled off the highway and onto the shoulder, trying to conserve as much gas as possible. He felt desperate and frustrated, trapped and helpless. He was about 45 minutes away from the office. He decided to go back to the hotel, which was only 10 minutes away. He finally made it to the hotel and gave the key to the valet. Once he entered through the main entrance, he noticed a group of police officers standing near the reception, talking to the manager. He thought nothing of it at first, but as he got closer, he realized that they were all staring at him. Then he read the lips of the manager saying, "That's him." He tried to act casual and continued walking towards them, but the officers started to move towards him as well. Once he got closer, one of the officers approached him and said, "Mr. Jackson, I'm Officer Murphy. I have a warrant for your arrest as a suspect for the murder of your mother, Catherine Jackson." When he saw Officer Murphy getting the handcuffs out, Donnie panicked and decided to make a run for it. Really? Innocent people don't make a run for it. He had to find out what was going on with all his finances before he went to jail, he thought. Isn't this guy a lawyer? He sprinted down the hallway, dodging the officers as they reached out to grab him. He could hear them shouting behind him, but he didn't look back. He kept running between people, not to be an easy target in case they shot him. Why would they shoot him? He's doesn't have a weapon. He doesn't have a weapon. Finally, he reached the end of the hallway, pushed open the door, and saw people who were standing outside. He ran down the stairs, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the sound of the police officer's footsteps behind him getting closer and closer. He looked around, trying to spot any potential escape routes. He saw a narrow alleyway between two buildings and darted towards it, hoping it would lead him to safety. He ran down the alleyway, his feet pounding against the pavement. He could hear the police officers shouting behind him, but he kept going. He reached the end of the alleyway and saw a busy street ahead. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of which way to go, but he didn't have much time to think. He sprinted across the street, dodging cars and buses as he went. He could hear the police officers' sirens getting closer and closer. Finally, he reached the other side of the street, spotted a park, and ran towards it. Ducking behind a large tree and catching his breath, he waited for a few moments, listening for any sign of the police officers. When he didn't hear anything, he cautiously peeked out from behind the tree. To his relief, he saw that the police officers had lost sight of him and were nowhere to be seen. Hold on. Weren't they just behind him? Like he could hear them shouting and their footsteps getting closer and closer in the alleyway? He breathed a sigh of relief and grinned to himself, feeling triumphant, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He reached out to grab his phone to turn it off. He knew it was only a matter of time before they could locate him by his phone. It was strange that his financial issue and the police warrant happened on the same day. Was it another setup? He couldn't feel the phone. He must have lost it during the chase. The park was empty save for a few stray dogs that were rummaging through the trash cans. Donnie felt a sense of loneliness wash over him. At this point, he was completely alone in the world. He didn't have much time to dwell on his thoughts. The sun was starting to set, and it had been a long day. He looked around the park again, hoping to find a hidden corner or a secluded spot where he could stay a bit longer. In the end, he decided to sit on an old bench. He wrapped his coat tighter around himself, trying to keep warm. The weather was cold, and he could feel the chill seeping into his bones. He closed his eyes and leaned his head back, feeling the weight of his mental and physical exhaustion. Without realizing it, he drifted off to sleep. The sounds of the city faded away, and he was lost in his own world. He didn't notice the cold getting colder, or the night getting darker. He was oblivious to the world around him, lost in the comfort of his slumber. When he finally woke up, he was disoriented and confused. He looked around, trying to figure out what was happening. In the distance, among the trees, he could see the silhouette of a man standing, his face hidden in the shadows. But he could tell he was wearing a cowboy hat. His heart began to race, and he felt a surge of fear. "What do you want from me?" he yelled. "Haven't you done enough?" The silence of the park and the distant sirens filled the space. "Tell me!" he yelled again. Then his voice submitted to desperation, and he broke into tears. "Please stop. I can't do this. I will do the right thing. I will go to the police station and turn myself in." The silhouette disappeared in the trees. Turn himself in for what? He didn't kill his mother. Unless this is about his father, who we learned in previous chapters he did apparently shoot. An accident, though. But he did it. Well, that takes us to the end of chapter 13 and the end of the puzzle. Well done. Supernatural. Hey there. How the heck are you? I was lurking on a few of your streams. Apologies I didn't say hi, but I was there. You were doing like your work streams kind of stuff. GG on the puzzle? Absolutely. Would you like another puzzle? I can whip up another one if you want. Or we can just gaze at this one. It's your call. That was fun. I'm glad. See, I went easy on you this time. It was only like a little over 300 pieces. You know, I didn't want to... You know, the last one was a bit tough. I agree. It was a bit tough. Because if you want another one, I can certainly get one going. And then I'll do some push-ups. Another small puzzle will be good. Okay. We can certainly do that. Let me bring up... Let's see. Let's see if I can find something... Oh, yeah. Yeah, this will be good. This will be good. About 350 pieces. That's not too bad. Create link. Copy link. Link is copied. Let me get over to the command over here. Swap it out. Just a moment. Okay, that's updated. Okay, new puzzle is all ready. All right, push-ups time. right. I didn't go too crazy this time. Thank you. Thank you. I just did 30. Nothing too, too nutty. All right. Let's see, how many pages do we have left? Oh boy. We've only got like 53 pages left. That's nuts. What do you mean you're watching? It's fine. I actually, I did some push-ups earlier today to kind of test myself, and I did okay. So really, I've done 64 push-ups today in total. So, All right. Chapter 14 is called Stranger Things Have Happened. And we're on page 200. I hope you're ready, because it's going to get weird, apparently. Oh, and there's, I'm assuming this is a jail cell. Something with bars. Yep, I think so. All right. Before her visit, Natalie had to go through a security check. She had to be searched, and her belongings were scanned. She had to provide identification and undergo a background check. She was taken to the visitation room where she was able to see Donnie through a glass partition. She picked up the phone, and he did too. "Hey kiddo, how you holding up?" she asked with a small voice. "I'm okay, I guess." "Don't worry about anything. I'll contact Emily, David, Mark, everybody. I'm sure they'll figure something out." "I want you to call Rachel. I wasn't able to contact her before I got here. I've been here for a couple of days and I haven't heard from her. We will figure it out, or we will figure everything out, I promise." They talked and caught up for a while. Natalie tried to change the subject every time he mentioned something that related to previous events. Now the visitation was coming to an end. Natalie could see the guards starting to usher people towards the exit, and she knew that it was time to go. She stood up and put her hand on the partition. "I'm sorry, but I have to go now," she said. "I have some things I need to take care of." Her brother nodded understandingly. "I know, Nat," he said. "It's okay. I'm glad you came to visit. I'll see you next time." She handed her visitor's pass to the guard and stepped outside, feeling a mix of emotions as she left the prison behind. She climbed into her car, started the engine, eager to get to the office and find out what was going on. She was feeling hurt and angry. As she was driving, it started to rain heavily. The rain only seemed to make Natalie feel even more upset, and she found herself getting more and more frustrated as she drove. Super, you're late. This is puzzle number 2. What? They did it without you. See? Stump Mama is giving you the cold, stumped eyes there. I was too busy crying about my Cowboys. This is why you gotta watch college sports instead. She was honking her horn at other drivers who she felt were driving too slowly, and she was even yelling out the window at them. But despite her anger, the rain continued to pour down, making it difficult for Natalie to see the road ahead of her. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Natalie arrived. She stormed out of her car and marched toward the building, drenched from the rain, still feeling very upset. As she reached the entrance of the building, she was stopped by a security guard. The guard asked what her business was. Natalie told him that she was there to see Rachel. The guard looked at her skeptically and told her that she needed an appointment in order to see her. It was Rachel's instructions that nobody could see her without a prior arrangement. Natalie started to shout at the guard, demanding that she let her through. The guard, however, remained calm and continued to insist that she needed an appointment. Here's your first problem being a Cowboys fan. Isn't it past your bedtime? I got the puzzle from here. Y'all are hilarious. I love it. The puzzle banter makes my night. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Feeling frustrated, Natalie started to push past the guard, but he was able to hold her back. He called for backup, and soon 2 more security guards arrived to help him. Together, they were able to restrain and prevent her from entering the building. "I am Donnie's sister," she yelled at the top of her voice. The security men were taken aback and loosened their grips. "We're sorry, we didn't know who you were. Can you please just have a seat in the waiting room? I will be right with you." "Hey Dee, finishing dinner and hanging out with the kiddo but lurking? Thanks, hey Dee. Been thinking about you. I hope you're doing okay." A few minutes later, the security man came to Natalie and apologized again. He told her she could go up to see Rachel. Rachel made Natalie wait in the waiting room for 20 minutes. Natalie got more fidgety with every minute. Then Julie said gently, "Miss Hudson will see you now." Oh, and nice. She was surprised by how the office looked. She had seen the office once before, and it had Donnie's touch, and now it's all gone. I still think Rachel's in on this, by the way. The office had comfortable sofas, plants, artwork, and other items. Rachel was on the phone, but she gestured to Natalie to sit on the leather sofa away from the office. She then hung up the phone, got up with a cheering smile, and walked over to Natalie and said, "Oh my God, Nat, how are you doing?" She bent down and gave Rachel a warm hug. "Rachel, why didn't you visit Donnie?" she asked with an expressionless face and a low tone. "I was planning on doing it, but work has been busy. I have no idea how your brother was taking care of it all. It's crazy." "He needed you, Rachel. He tried to call you." Rachel became defensive and said, "I know, but he trusted me with a big company. Now I run everything. I don't even have time to scratch my head." "Well, I can see you had time to refurbish the office," Natalie said sarcastically. There was a moment of silence where the tension level was sensed. "I have a meeting now. I've got to go. Is there anything specifically you wanted to talk about? Because as far as I remember, Donnie trusted me with everything rather than his own sister." Before Natalie was able to say anything back, Rachel walked back to her desk and pressed a button to talk to Julie. "Mrs. Jackson is leaving now, Julie." Natalie stood and walked to the door, feeling utterly embarrassed but furious. She could see the takeover and the changes Rachel had made so far. She did not even have the chance to speak to any of Donnie's friends. She was leaving the building. As she walked out the door, David quickly caught up to her and grabbed her arm, urging her to keep walking. "I have something important to tell you," he said. "It's a secret, and I don't want anyone else to hear it." Natalie was curious, but also a little hesitant. With all that had been happening, she didn't know who to trust. As they strolled down the busy city streets, David checked his surroundings and said, "I need you to meet somebody." "What is going on, David?" "Rachel has changed everything, even herself. I didn't get to speak to Emily. I want you guys to help Donnie. He's not in a good place." Like, not in a good place physically or emotionally. Because, like, prison isn't a good place. So. David chuckled. "That's not the only thing she changed, Nat. Stranger things have happened. Emily isn't here anymore. Nobody's here but me and Mark." David handed over a piece of paper with a phone number and said, "This is the guy who will have more answers for you. Maybe. I don't know, but contact him and meet up with him. I can't stay here longer. I really want to keep my job in this office. I don't want to give her any reason to fire me. I am trying to stay here for Donnie." He went back to the building in a hurry. Natalie stared at the phone number, and before she knew it, she was dialing. "Hi, my name is Natalie. I'm Donnie's sister. David..." "Write down this address. There's a restaurant. Your name will be at the front with the hostess. I will see you in 30 minutes. Chris hung up. As Natalie drove down the highway, her mind raced with thoughts of the strange conversation she just had. She couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. She had no idea who this man was, but she was desperate for any clues to help Donnie. She only agreed, hoping that she might finally get some answers. As she pulled into the parking lot, Natalie's heart was pounding. She took a deep breath and tried to calm her nerves before making her way inside. As she walked through the big front door, she was immediately struck by the grandeur of the place. The entrance was adorned with sparkling Everything around this place has a chandelier that sparkles. I feel like Stunt Mama has a cheat code for the puzzles. Well, I did make it easy. It's only like 350. Keep up, Buttercup. Oh, that's great. Stunt Mama, I think you need to do a puzzle stream so that we can watch you do it. Sparkling chandeliers and red carpet, and the air was filled with the sound of soft classical music. She was greeted by a polite hostess who led her through the bustling dining room to a table near the back. As Natalie approached the table, she was surprised to see not one, but two men seated there. She had been expecting to meet Chris, but now it seemed that he had brought someone else. She couldn't figure out who he was as his back was facing her. "Hi, Natalie," said Chris with a charming smile. "I'm so glad you could make it." The hostess pulled out Natalie's chair and she took a seat, glancing around the opulent dining room as she did so. Okay, this author uses the word opulent a lot. The restaurant was filled with well-dressed couples and groups, all enjoying the luxuries surrounding and the fine dining experience. Natalie couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as she sat down across from the stranger. "I'm sorry for the strange way we had to meet," Chris said, "but I promise I have some important information for you." Natalie wondered why Chris had brought someone else to their meeting, but as she looked closer at him, something about him seemed familiar. She couldn't quite place it, but she felt like she knew him from somewhere. Do I know you? Natalie asked, looking at him quizzically. Mr. Gibbs chuckled. It's been a long time, my dear, he said. I'm your Uncle John. You probably don't recognize me, but I haven't seen you since you were a kid. Natalie's eyes widened in shock as she realized who John was. She hadn't seen her uncle in over 15 years, and she had no idea he would be here today. Overwhelmed with emotion, she got up and walked around the table, threw her arms around her uncle, and hugged him tightly. As they sat down to talk, Natalie couldn't believe how much her uncle had changed. He had aged, of course, but he was still the kind, warm-hearted man she remembered from her childhood. Wait. Couldn't believe how much he'd changed, but he was still the kind, warm... Okay. So... Anyway, Chris gave them some time to catch up. Natalie kept looking at Chris, and she started to notice how handsome he was. She couldn't focus on the conversation with her uncle as she kept taking brief glances at his cheekbones, his hair, and his scruffy beard. Then her train of thoughts was interrupted by her uncle's voice. What Chris is about to tell you will change everything. Brace for it. Natalie has always suspected that there were more to her mother's past than she had been told, and the prospect of finally getting some answers was both exciting and daunting. She took a deep breath and tried to steady her nerves as Chris handed a printout of the email. As Natalie began to read, her facial expressions changed from confusion to shock to disbelief. The email revealed that her mother had been involved in a major scandal, and the person who helped her was Dr. Lindell. Natalie couldn't believe what she was reading. She had always thought of her mother as kind and loving to Donnie, but now she wasn't so sure. Mr. Gibbs watched Natalie's reaction with interest, noting the way her eyebrows furrowed and her lips tightened as she read. When Natalie finished the email, she looked up at Chris with tears in her eyes. Is this true? She asked, her voice shaking. Is my mother really the person this email says she is? Okay, obviously I made that puzzle way too easy. Way too easy. Stepmama's like, yeah, just another easy one. For reals? Okay. Alright. Okay. Hold on. Since you're all killing it, I got something for you. Just you wait. Oh, yeah. Since you're all such puzzle masters and geniuses. Yep. This is gonna be good. Custom commands, puzzle, paste, save. Okay. Have fun with this one. Enjoy. Mr. Gibbs nodded gravely. I'm afraid so, he said. I'm sorry to have to be the one to tell you, but I thought you deserved to know the truth. Natalie sat in silence for a moment, trying to process everything she had just learned. She felt as if her entire world had been turned upside down. She didn't know how to feel about her mother now, or how to move forward. You know what this means. You know what that means, dear, Mr. Gibbs exclaimed. She looked at him, wondering what his next sentence was going to be. Then he said, all the money that she got from the life insurance is fraudulent. How is that going to help Donnie? Think about it, Natalie. If Dr. Lindell is in on it, that means Donnie is not mentally sick. That in turn means he's not the one who killed Catherine. As the words sunk in, Natalie's mind raced with shock and disbelief. She sat in stunned silence. Her mind was racing as she tried to process everything that had just happened. Okay, so do we go to the police with this information? She asked. Chris gave Natalie a charming wink and said, that's a good chance the police are involved too. Dun dun dun. Alright, that ends chapter 14. So the mother was involved in a very big scandal, and all of Donnie's money is bad money. Are we surprised? Not really. Alright, we're going to keep this train moving. We're on chapter 15, page 212. Chapter 15 is literally just called Joe. During recreational hour, Donnie sat on a bench, staring blankly at the floor as he tried to make sense of what had happened. How his life had turned upside down. From a successful lawyer to being behind bars, convicted of killing his own mother. As he was lost in thought, he heard the sound of footsteps approaching his cell. He looked up to see another prisoner, a burly man with a thick beard, walking towards him. Hey man, you mind if I sit down? The man asked, gesturing to the empty spot on the bench next to Donnie. Donnie nodded silently, and the man sat down, eyeing him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. You look like you could use a friend, the man said. I'm Joe, by the way. What's your name? Donnie, he replied in a quiet voice. Well, Donnie, I couldn't help but overhear your case. It sounds like you're going through a rough time. You think you might have a split personality? Donnie nodded. I don't know what to think. I don't remember anything about the night my mother was killed. It's like it was someone else, but all the evidence pointed to me. And I got tired of fighting life. Joe patted Donnie's shoulder sympathetically. I know it's hard, man, but you can't give up hope. You gotta keep fighting, no matter how hopeless it may seem. You never know what might happen. Donnie looked at Joe with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Maybe, he thought, there was still a chance for him to prove his innocence. He thought he could have won had he had his brilliant mind before Mike walked into his life. Donnie looked up at Joe with a sad expression on his face. I don't know what to do, man. I just pled guilty because I lost hope. I figured it was the only way to get a lighter sentence. Joe nodded sympathetically. I understand, Donnie, but don't give up hope. There are ways to fight these things, even from behind bars. Have you talked to a lawyer about appealing your case? Donnie shook his head. I don't have a lawyer. Joe patted Donnie's shoulder again. Have you had any visitors? Donnie's face fell. No, not really. My sister Natalie came to see me last week, but that's it. I was hoping my girlfriend Rachel would come, but it doesn't look like she's coming. Joe frowned. Maybe she'll come at the next visitation. And in the meantime, try to keep yourself busy. Do you have any hobbies or activities you can do in here? Donnie shrugged. Not really. I'm just trying to get through each day as it comes. It's hard, you know? I miss my freedom. Joe nodded understandingly. I know it's hard, man. But try to stay positive. Remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. It's like a big group, like a club. Joe looked at Donnie with a serious expression on his face. Listen, Donnie, I might have an idea. Have you heard of the insanity defense? Donnie shook his head. No, I haven't. What is it? Okay, Donnie's a lawyer. He hasn't heard of the insanity defense? Okay. Donnie pretended to consider this for a moment, even though he was actually quite familiar with the... Okay, thank you. with the insanity defense. He was interested to see what else Joe had to say. Joe explained. It's a defense that can be used in criminal cases, where the defendant is claiming that they were not responsible for their actions, because they were suffering from a mental illness at the time of the crime. If you can prove that you have a split personality disorder, and that one of your other personalities committed the crime, you might be able to get a lighter sentence. It's worth a shot at least. Donnie looked at Joe with renewed interest. So, what did you do for a living before coming to prison? He asked. Joe hesitated for a moment before answering. I was a lawyer, but I made a mistake, and now I'm paying the price. Donnie raised an eyebrow. A mistake? What happened? Joe sighed. I was working on a high-profile case, and I let my ego get the best of me. I cut corners and bent the rules, and it ended up costing me everything. I lost my license, my reputation, and now my freedom. Donnie shook his head in disbelief. I can't even imagine. That must have been rough. Tough. Joe nodded. It was. But I learned my lesson. Now, I just try to make the most of my time here and hope for the best. Donnie nodded understandingly. I know how you feel. It's tough being stuck in here, but we have to keep our heads up and hope for the best. As the two sat outside during Wait, what? Hold on. Oh, yeah, they're just on a bench. All right. I got confused there for a moment. My bad. Sorry. Back on track. As the two sat outside during recreational hour, Donnie listened intently as Joe shared his story of falling from grace and the lessons he learned from his mistakes. The two men watched as other inmates played basketball or walked around the yard, enjoying the brief respite from their daily routines. Some were gathered in small groups, chatting and laughing, while others sat alone, lost in thought. Despite the harsh realities of their surroundings, Donnie and Joe found solace in each other's company. As the sun began to set, they reluctantly parted ways, each grateful for the chance to connect with someone who understood the challenges they faced. As they walked back to their cells, they knew that they had formed a bond. The next day was visitation day, and as Joe sat in his cell, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness as he watched the other inmates receive visitors. He had nobody coming to see him, and it was a lonely reminder of all he had lost. As Donnie passed by on his way to the visitation room, he gave Joe a sympathetic look. I'm sorry, man, he said. I know it's tough not having anyone to visit. Joe shrugged. It is what it is. I can't change the past. All I can do is try to make the most of my time here. Donnie nodded understandingly and made his way to the visitation room. As he waited for his own visitor, he was surprised to see Rachel walking through the door. He picked up the speaker handle immediately. Rachel, he exclaimed. I didn't expect to see you here. Rachel sat down and picked up the speaker on the other side of the partition and said, Baby, I'm sorry I haven't been able to visit more often, she said, but the company had been keeping me really busy. I've been working hard to keep it running smoothly while you're away. Donnie nodded. I'm sorry I left you with such a burden, he said, but I'm grateful that you've been able to handle it so well. Rachel smiled. I've missed you, Donnie. I want you to know that I still care about you, and I want to do everything I can to help you. I'll get you the best lawyer I can find, and we'll fight to get you out of here as soon as possible. Donnie shook his head. No, Rachel. I don't want to drag you down with me. Just focus on running the company and taking care of yourself. Rachel's eyes welled up with tears. I can't just sit back and do nothing while you're in here, she said. I love you, Donnie. I want to support you here. I want to support you and be there for you, no matter what. Donnie placed his palm against the glass partition. Rachel placed her palm against his as if they were touching. I love you too. Crocodile tears, right? Rachel nodded, understanding. I'll be here for you no matter what, she said. I'll visit as often as I can, and I'll support you in any way that I can. Donnie smiled and leaned in closer to the partition. Thank you, Rachel. That means the world to me. At the end of the visitation period, or as the end of the visitation period approached, Donnie said, I wonder why Natalie has not come to see me. I had hoped that she would. Rachel noticed a look of disappointment on Donnie's face and explained. There is a limit to the number of visitors an inmate can have at one time, and because I came in early, I don't think they'll let Natalie in even if she wants to come now. Donnie chuckled at Rachel's understanding of the prison system. You're right, he said. I'm impressed with how you know the system so well. Rachel shrugged. I've had to learn a lot since you've been here. It's been tough, but I'm doing my best to stay strong and support you. Donnie and Rachel said their goodbyes and promised to keep in touch. Donnie watched as Rachel left the visitation room, feeling grateful for her support and love. As he made his way back to his cell, he couldn't help but wonder what the future held for him. How long it would take for him to end up like Joe, who sat in his cell with no one to visit him. And that's the end of the chapter. Now, keep in mind this book is part 1, so we may never actually figure out who this Mike guy is, if Rachel's in on it or not. If anyone wants to know or keep the story going, all you have to do is type !honest, and you'll have the link to this book and the subsequent books thereafter. Now, with that being said, I have informed the lady I've been talking to, who I think is I don't know if she's the co-writer for this. She has co-written other books with this guy. That's on the back cover here. Dr. Aziz, I think is his name. But I think that's how you pronounce it. I know she's helped with some editing. So I have informed her of the things that we've found, and she's going to pass that on to see if, updates are going to happen or not. Now, what the state of the other two or other books in the series are like, I don't know. And if you want to find out, you are more than welcome to. But in the meantime, we're just going to keep trucking along. My goal is to finish this book tonight. Because when we do, today's Sunday, on Thursday, we're starting a brand new book of Lady K's. Chapter 16 is called The First Clue, and there's a picture of a Corvette on the front, because it's Chris's Corvette. As Chris walked into the bar that he owned a part of, he was greeted by his business partner, Richard. Chris had brought David, a former colleague, to the bar earlier in the week in order to have a conversation starter with Richard. Yeah, we know that. Why? Anyway. Hey, Richard, Chris said as he approached the bar. How's business been today? Richard smiled. It's been great. We've had a lot of foot traffic, and we made some good sales. I think this new marketing campaign we started is really paying off. Chris nodded. I'm glad to hear it. I think we're on the right track. Richard nodded. I agree. I think we've got some good thing going here. We just need to keep the momentum going. Chris agreed. Definitely. I think we should keep experimenting with different marketing strategies and see what works best. We don't want to get complacent and lose our edge. Richard nodded. Absolutely. I'm always open to trying new things. And if your expertise in marketing and business, I know we can keep this place thriving. As Chris and Richard continued their conversation, Chris brought up the topic of David, the former colleague he had brought to the bar earlier in the week. So, what'd you think of David? You know, the guy who came in with me the other day? He has some money saved. He might be a good partner to expand the business. Chris asked. Do you remember him? Richard nodded. Oh yeah, I know David. He used to come in here with that rich kid, Donnie, and a few other people. They were regulars back when the bar was quiet. Chris raised an eyebrow. Really? I had no idea they were regulars here. They don't come here anymore? Richard thought for a moment. Not really. The last time I saw them, I remember seeing one of them. I think her name was Rachel, having what seemed like a heated argument outside the bar with some guy I'd never seen before. An argument? Chris asked, interested. Do you remember what he looked like? Richard shook his head. Not really. I didn't get a good look at him. I think he was wearing a cowboy hat, though. Chris nearly choked on his drink. What? A cowboy hat? I think so. I didn't really get a good look. They were on the other side of the road. Gotta go, Chris says as he grabbed the keys and rushed out the bar. Hey, Chris, what's going on? What about the cowboy hat? Richard yelled, but Chris was already in his car. Did you just say cowboy hat? I sure did. That's because this Mike guy, the man in question who's causing all the problems, he wears a cowboy hat. Chris sped down the street in his Corvette, his mind racing as he thought about the new information he had just learned from Richard. He knew he had to act fast if he wanted to get to the bottom of this mystery. As he drove, he pulled out his phone and dialed Mr. Gibbs' number. Hello, Mr. Gibbs? Chris asked when the man answered. It's Chris. I have some new information that I think you should know about. Can we meet and discuss it? Cowboy hats are a weakness of mine. Well, this guy was not a nice guy, so he might not be too appealing. Of course, Chris, Mr. Gibbs replied. What's this about? I'd rather not discuss it over the phone, Chris said. Can we meet at your hotel in 30 minutes? Sure thing, Mr. Gibbs said. I'll see you then. He hung up and dialed another number. Natalie? Chris asked when the woman answered. It's Chris. I have some important information that I need to discuss with you and your uncle. He's staying at the Red Diamond Hotel. Can you meet us there in 30? Oh my God, Chris, Natalie said, her voice panicked. What's going on? Is everything okay? I'll explain when I see you, Chris said. Just meet us at the hotel, okay? Okay, Natalie said, her voice still laced with concern. I'll see you then. Chris hung up the phone and continued his drive. Chris arrived at the hotel and headed straight for the lobby, where he found Mr. Gibbs waiting for him. The two men sat down in a quiet corner of the lobby, and Chris began to speak. "Mr. Gibbs," Chris said in a cool and calm voice, "I have some new information and I think you should know about. But we should wait for Natalie to arrive before I go into details." Mr. Gibbs nodded. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "I'll explain everything once Natalie gets here," Chris replied with a reassuring smile. They waited for another 15 minutes before Natalie arrived, looking worried and anxious. Chris stood up to greet her and led her over to the table where Mr. Gibbs was waiting. "Okay," Chris said once they were all seated. "I have reason to believe that Rachel may be behind all of this." "Rachel?" Natalie asked, shocked. "What makes you think that?" "I can't go into all the details right now, but Donnie said the person who attacked him was wearing a cowboy hat, right?" Chris said, his voice still cool and collected. That's right," Natalie said in a confused tone. "All the videos were missing, and Rachel had access to the tapes in the company. But that doesn't explain how his phone disappeared, and how the electricity was off when my mother was murdered." "I know. I just needed to tell you what I've got so far," Chris said, his voice dripping with confidence. "I'll be in touch as soon as I have more information. Meanwhile, I want you to avoid any contact with Rachel. I don't want her to suspect anything." With that, Chris stood up and bid farewell to Mr. Gibbs and Natalie, promising to keep them updated on his investigation. He left the hotel. As Chris stood up to leave the hotel, Natalie couldn't help but watch him with a mix of admiration and attraction. His deep, soft voice always had a calming effect on her, and she found herself drawn to his cool and collected demeanor. As he bid farewell to Mr. Gibbs and Natalie, promising to keep them updated on his investigation, Natalie couldn't help but feel a pang of longing as she watched him walk away. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something special about Chris, and she hoped that one day she would have the chance to get to know him better. Oh my. As Chris disappeared out the door, Natalie sighed and turned back to Mr. Gibbs. Dude's a smooth operator. He's basically, well, James Bond, just the lack of Britishness and the ability to kill. Natalie sighed and turned back to Mr. Gibbs, trying to push thoughts of Chris out of her mind. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that Chris was someone extraordinary, someone worth getting to know better. And that takes us to chapter 17. Chapter 17 is, of course, Spiderweb. And there's a picture here. I'm assuming it's Rachel because that's who we're going to talk about. Rachel finished up her work for the day and gathered her things, ready to head home. As she walked out of the office building, she noticed that one of her car tires was flat. She cursed under her breath, wondering what to do. She looked around, but there was nobody on the horizon to help out. Just as she was about to pull out her phone and call for a tow truck, she heard a voice behind her. "Do you need some help?" Rachel turned to see Chris standing behind her, a concerned expression on his face. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, actually I do," Rachel answered, feeling a mix of relief and embarrassment. "One of my tires is flat and I have no idea how to change it." "No problem," Chris said, smiling. "I can help you with that. Do you have a spare tire in the trunk?" Rachel nodded and led Chris to the back of the car, where she popped open the trunk and retrieved the spare tire. Chris took his shirt off, revealing his toned chest. "I don't want to get it dirty," he said with a wink, knelt down and began to work on changing the tire, expertly loosening the bolts and removing the flat tire. I sure hope they have a jack with them, otherwise that's going to be a bit of a problem. As he worked, Rachel watched him with a mix of gratitude and curiosity. She couldn't help but wonder who this mysterious man was and why he was being so helpful. "Do you live around here?" she asked, trying to break the silence. "No, actually, I was just on my way to a bar nearby," he answered as he kept working on the tire. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to delay you," she said with a low voice. He looked at her with the angle of his eye and smiled. "Anything for a pretty lady." She couldn't help but smile. Rachel blushed at the flattery. The sentence sent shivers up and down her spine. Once the tire was changed, Chris stood up and wiped his hands on his jeans. "There you go," he said with a smile. "All set." "Thank you so much," Rachel said, feeling relieved. "I don't know what I would have done without your help." "It was no problem," Chris said. "If there is anything else I can do for you..." Rachel shook her head. "No, I think I'm good, but thank you again. You really saved my skin." "No problem," Chris said with a smile. "I'm just glad I could help. Take care now." With that, Chris turned and walked away, leaving Rachel standing by her car with a mix of gratitude and confusion. Who was this man, and why had he been so willing to help her out of a bind? Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Chris than met the eye, and she found herself wanting to know more about him. Everybody wants to know more about Chris, apparently. As Chris walked away from Rachel's car, he turned back to Rachel. He called out to her with a cool and casual tone. "Hey," he said, "you up for a drink? This bar is really cool. It's just down the street. Follow me. We can grab a drink together." Rachel never hesitated. She couldn't resist his confident demeanor and irresistible charm. "Okay," she said, nodding. "Lead the way." Chris grinned and led the way down the street, Rachel walking beside him. As they walked, he glanced back at her with a smile. "I'm Harry, by the way. I'd shake your hand, but mine are dirty." "Hi, Harry, I'm Rachel." He maintained strong eye contact with her as he spoke. When they arrived at the bar, Chris held the door open for Rachel, and they found a quiet corner booth to sit in. He ordered drinks for the two of them. They sat and sipped their drinks. "So, Rachel," he said, leaning in close, "I know we just met, but I can't shake the feeling that there's something special about you. What do you do?" "I own different types of businesses. I manage them all. I stay busy. What about you?" "Oh, I'm an artist. I see things that I like, make beautiful things out of them," Chris said, being vague. "I don't get it," Rachel said as she took the last sip of her drink, trying to distract herself from how charming Chris was. "Do you like flowers?" "Who doesn't?" Rachel replied with a smile. "When you put them in a vase, arrange them according to colors, you create a beautiful thing out of them. I do that in real life." I still don't know what that means. The conversation continued. With each sentence, Rachel felt more impressed with his replies. His mysterious personality made him more appealing to her. "Would you be interested in going out with me again sometime? Or would you like to make a beautiful thing out of what we both like?" Rachel looked into Chris's eyes and felt a spark of attraction flicker between them. She couldn't resist his charm and good looks, and she knew she wanted to see him again. "Yes," she said with a smile. "I'd love to go out with you again. And let's make a beautiful thing tonight." Chris grinned and took her hand in his, leaned down and started kissing her fingers gently. The alcohol had the steering wheel of a racing car in her brain. She couldn't help but hold his face, pull him up, and kiss him passionately. "Let's go," she whispered as she breathed heavily near his ear. The next morning, Rachel woke up with a headache. She vaguely remembered what had happened the night before, but she had a smile on her face. "Harry?" she yelled, wondering where he was. Nobody replied. She wrapped a sheet around her naked body. As she sat up in bed and dangled her legs, she saw a piece of paper with a phone number on it. It only said, "Call me," with his phone number. And that is chapter 17. We only have 2 chapters left, folks. That is all. Chapter 18, though, is called Who is Chris? Rachel and Chris had been dating for a week. They were really hitting it off, and Rachel was excited to spend every evening together. Chris had planned a romantic candlelit dinner for the two of them at a fancy restaurant downtown at the end of the week. As Chris drove his shiny Corvette to drop her off at work one morning, he couldn't help but press down on the accelerator and a little harder like he usually does. Rachel sat in the passenger seat, grinning from ear to ear. "Wow, this car is amazing. I love it," she exclaimed as she ran her hand along the smooth leather interior. "Speaking of which, why don't you get a better car than the one you usually drive now?" "Forgive me, it's not really my place, but was just wondering. It reminds me of my mother. She got it for me a few years ago with her last savings. I have good memories with this car." "Oh, I completely understand. It's difficult to let go of things we've had for many years." "Oh, no, I've only had it for 2 years. That was the best she could afford." Chris turned to Rachel, pretending to be confused. He squinted his eyes. "I wasn't always financially comfortable. I bought my house 4 weeks ago. I used to live in a smaller house with my mom." Chris tried not to push it so that she didn't become suspicious. "So you won the lottery or something?" he asked, trying to be dismissive of the brand new information. "Well, let's just say you like things and you turn them into beautiful things. I turned something I didn't like into a beautiful thing." Chris beamed with pride. "I'm glad you like it. I can't wait to take you out on a proper date and show you a good time." By this time, they arrived at her building, and he pulled up right in front of it. He then said, "To be continued?" "To be continued," she said as she leaned towards him and gave him a kiss on the cheek. As they drove to a restaurant later that evening, the conversation flowed easily between them. They talked about their interests, their families, and their hopes for the future. Chris was struck by how much he had in common with Rachel and how much he enjoyed her company. As Chris dropped her off at the office the next morning, Rachel couldn't help but feel a sense of happiness and excitement that seemed to radiate from within. People at work noticed the change in her demeanor immediately and couldn't help but comment on it. "Good morning, beautiful Julie." "Hey, Mrs. Bloom. You seem extra chipper this morning," said Julie as They walked to the conference room together, getting ready for a morning meeting. Rachel grinned and couldn't stop herself from gushing about Chris. I met this amazing guy, and we've been seeing each other for a week now. I just can't get him out of my head. Everybody in the conference room heard that. Julie said, Well, it looks like he's definitely having a positive effect on you. You seem like a whole new person. As the day went on, Rachel found herself chatting with everyone about Chris and her newfound happiness. It was clear to everyone that she was head over heels in love, and they were all happy to see her so content. David couldn't help but feel resentment, as he liked Donnie. He wasn't aware that Rachel was dating... he wasn't aware that Rachel was dating Chris because she always referred to him as Harry. Rachel couldn't wait to get off work and spend more time with Chris. She knew that their relationship was still in the early stages, but she had a feeling that it was going to be something special. Excuse me. The big night had arrived, and as Chris drove his shiny red Corvette to pick up Rachel from her house, she couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nerves. He had planned a special evening for the two of them, and was determined to make it perfect. Or so he told her. Why do I feel like Chris has actually set something up? Like, to catch her in the act or something. I don't know. Rachel hopped into the passenger seat, fully dressed and ready for their date. Chris was dressed up too, but he had one more surprise in store for Rachel. Hey, can you do me a favor and close your eyes for a minute? Chris asked as he pulled out a blindfold. I promise, it's all part of the surprise. Rachel hesitated just for a moment before finally agreeing. Okay, that's exciting, she said with a smile. Chris carefully placed the blindfold over Rachel's eyes and gently guided her head back onto the headrest. Do you trust me? He asked again. Oddly enough, with my life, Rachel replied confidently. Chris grinned and began to drive. He wanted to take Rachel to a nice restaurant that he had heard great things about, but he didn't want her to see it until they arrived. He wanted the surprise to be perfect. As they drove, Chris and Rachel chatted about their day. Rachel told Chris about her work and her co-workers, and Chris shared some funny stories about his friends, being the charming man he was. They laughed and joked together, enjoying each other's company. Finally, Chris pulled up to the restaurant and helped Rachel out of the car. He removed the blindfold and waited anxiously for her reaction. Rachel gasped in delight and saw the beautiful restaurant in front of her. Waiters were waiting outside the door on the front of the restaurant. Lights shined on the wall with the sentence, I love you, Rachel. Oh my gosh, this is amazing, she exclaimed, turning to Chris with a huge grin on her face. You really know how to spoil a girl. She jumped on him, putting her arm around him. Chris chuckled and wrapped his arm around Rachel's waist. I'm just glad you're happy. Now, let's go in and enjoy a delicious meal together. The whole restaurant is yours for tonight. As they chatted and laughed together, Chris finally leaned forward, held her hand, and said, Rachel, I know we've only been dating for a few weeks, but I feel like I've known you for forever, he said, looking into her eyes. I just can't imagine my life without you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, if you'll have me. Rachel's eyes widened in surprise. She knew that she had strong feelings for Chris, but she also knew that she had a past that she wasn't proud of. She hesitated for a moment before finally speaking up. Harry, I care about you a lot, and I really enjoy spending time with you, she said softly. But you have to understand that I've done things in my past that I'm not proud of. I want to be honest with you about those things, but I need some time to work up the courage to tell you about them. Can you be patient with me and give me a little more time? Is there someone else? I mean, someone who is that successful and beautiful would not be single for that long. No, there isn't. It's just... Then she paused. Rachel, I don't understand. I thought we had a great connection, he said, looking at her with a mix of confusion and hurt. Why can't you just tell me what's in your past? I want to be there for you no matter what. Rachel sighed and looked down at the table. Chris. Why would she call him Chris? She knows him as Harry. I know you want to know, but it's not easy for me to talk about, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I've made some bad choices in my life, and I'm not sure if you're able to accept me once you know the truth. Chris's face softened as he reached across the table to take Rachel's hand again. Rachel, I care about you, and I want to be there for you no matter what. You can trust me. Please, just tell me what's going on. There is nothing you can tell me that would change what I feel about you. Rachel hesitated for a moment before finally speaking up. Okay, Harry, I'll try to explain. Okay, that's what I thought. It's a typo. Page 242 at the bottom. That should say Harry, not Chris. But please don't judge me too harshly. I was not always treated right. I always felt I was second best. How do I put this? I was there when he needed me for years. I jumped at the snap of his fingers. Then one day I decided enough is enough. Now the roles have changed. He needs me now, and I won't be there for him. Does he still try to contact you? He changed his facial expressions to disappointment. Nope. I put him in jail. I told you I'm not the nicest person you will meet, she said as she pursed her mouth, apprehensive of his response. Okay, well, whenever you feel ready to tell me the whole story, I promise I won't judge. And nothing you can tell me will make me change the way I feel about you. I am falling for you, hard and fast. How about we call it a night and go to my place? He said with a confident smile, trying to reassure her. End of book by the next one. We already have a different book lined up. Locust, we're reading Kay's next book. Obsidian's Fall. And for what I'm told, it's going to be quite spicy. The next day, Rachel woke up feeling happier and more relieved than she had in a long time. She was grateful that the man she met was so understanding and supportive when she had opened up about her past, or at least part of it. As Chris drove Rachel to work, the two of them chatted and laughed together. When they arrived at Rachel's office, Chris pulled up to the curb and helped Rachel out of the car. She leaned in to give him a kiss goodbye, then headed into the building. Well, spicier than the last one? Let's ask, Kay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being completely dry documentary about ice, and 10 being, wow, not sure we can even read this because holy buckets. Where would you say it is? But as she walked through the doors, Rachel suddenly realized that she had left her phone in Chris's car. A 6 or a 7. Oh my. She hesitated for a moment, but then decided it was probably best to just let Chris bring it to her later. She headed to her office and began her workday, trying not to think about the phone. But as the hours ticked by, she found herself getting worried. She relied on her phone for so many things, she couldn't imagine going through the day without it. But more importantly, she might have left a message or two on there that she didn't want anyone to see. As Rachel sat at her desk, trying to focus on her work, she found herself growing more and more anxious about her phone. She couldn't stop thinking about the fact that she had left it in Chris's car. Again, that should be Harry's car, because in her mind, Chris is Harry. Just as she was deep in thought, the new financial advisor, a young man named Tom, came to her office. He had a question about some documents that they were working on, and he needed her input. "Hey, Mrs. Bloom, sorry to bother you, but I was wondering if you could take a look at this report and tell me what you think," Tom said, holding out a folder. Rachel looked up at Tom, but her mind was elsewhere. She was so preoccupied with her phone that she barely registered what he was saying. Oh, sorry, Tom, what did you say?" Rachel asked, feeling guilty for not paying attention. Tom repeated his question, and Rachel tried to focus on what he was saying. She knew that she needed to be present and engaged, but her worry about her phone was making it hard for her to concentrate. "I'm sorry, Tom, I'm just a little distracted today," Rachel said, shaking her head. "Can you give me a minute to gather my thoughts and I'll take a look at that later?" Tom nodded understandingly. "Sure thing, no problem. Just let me know when you're ready." After a few minutes, David came to her office. He had to head to court and wanted her signature on some paper. He noticed that she was distracted. "Hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you for a while. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm sorry. I forgot my phone in Harry's car." "Well, it's kind of difficult to do my job without your signature on some documents," David said with an angry tone. He managed to hide his resentment for Rachel, but couldn't help them resurfacing at times. Rachel looked at him and tried to show power. "Give me your phone," she said with a confident tone. He submissively gave her the phone. She dialed her phone number, but there was no answer. She then got a piece of paper that Chris gave her and dialed the number. She was shocked. She managed to hide her facial expressions. "Who is Chris?" David looked confused. "Oh, it's just a friend. That's actually the guy I hired to investigate Donnie's mother's murder. He's very good." "I bet he is." Oh boy, that's the end of chapter 18. So, the gig is up. Harry's been caught. At least he doesn't know that yet, but chapter 19 is our final chapter. And it's titled, "This Has Gone Too Far." There's also a picture of a very messed up vehicle. Looks like maybe in a crash. Could be the Corvettes. I don't know. That night, Rachel avoided contacting Chris. She left work early. She made many phone calls. Wait, how did she make many phone calls? She didn't have a phone. She stayed in a hotel for the night. Chris avoided contacting Rachel when he found her phone. He tried to buy time when he found the phone and quickly realized that it was a golden opportunity to gather more information about Rachel. He would give her a reason for his absence at a later stage. She thought she might come to his house after work, and he prepared an answer already. To his surprise, she didn't. She had only called her phone once, and never even tried to call him. Chris sat at his desk, his eyes fixed on Rachel's phone as he scrolled through the screens. Wouldn't the phone be locked? As he delved deeper into the phone, he began to uncover a wealth of information that was both surprising and enlightening. There were emails and texts from a friend, phone calls, and even a few notes and reminders that seemed to offer hints about Rachel's past. Chris couldn't believe how much he was learning about Rachel from her phone. It was like a window into her world, and he was fascinated by what he saw. As he sat at his desk, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, he picked up his phone and called Natalie. The phone rang and rang, then went to voicemail. "Nat, it's Chris. Call me ASAP." He left many messages on Natalie's phone. He tried to call Mr. Gibbs at the hotel, but he was put on the Do Not Disturb list, and the reception would not put him through to his room. His phone goes to voicemail. It seemed like they went to sleep. As Chris sat at his desk, he suddenly heard a noise from the garage. For a moment, he thought it might be a cat, but as the noise grew louder, he began to suspect there was something more sinister afoot. He stood up and walked cautiously to the garage, his hand hovering near the holster as he prepared to defend himself. But when he stepped into the garage, he found that it was empty. There was no sign of anyone or anything out of place. And he began to wonder if he'd just been imagining things. Shrugging off the strange noise, Chris returned to his desk and continued his work. I'm assuming, based on the image of the crashed car in the front of the chapter, that someone had just cut his brakes or something. Chris returned to his desk and continued his work, trying not to let the nerves get the best of him. He had a lot of information to go through, and he knew that he needed to keep his focus if he wanted to solve his case. But as the hours ticked by, Chris couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He kept glancing over his shoulder, checking the windows and doors to make sure they were secure. He knew that he was probably just being paranoid, but he couldn't shake the feeling that somebody was watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. Despite his fears, Chris plowed ahead, determined to get every piece of information about Rachel that he could. When he woke up the next morning, Chris was disoriented and groggy. He sat up, rubbing his eyes as he tried to shake off the remnants of his slumber. As he looked around, he realized that he had fallen asleep at his desk. His laptop was still open, the screen glowing in the darkness, and his notes and papers were scattered all around him. With a sigh, Chris stood up and stretched, trying to shake off the cobwebs of sleep. He knew that he had a lot of work to do, and he couldn't afford to waste any more time. He quickly gathered all his things and headed for the door. He jumped in the car and headed for the hotel where Mr. Gibbs was staying. As Chris sat behind the wheel of his shiny red Corvette, he drove his usual route to get to the highway. He had gotten to the bottom of it all, and that's what he did best. Again, he thought, Chris for the win. But as he sped down the highway, his thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, jarring sensation. The car seemed to lurch beneath him, and he realized with a sinking feeling that the brakes weren't responding. Wow, I called it. Panic set in, and Chris frantically pumped the brake pedal, trying to slow the car down, but there was no use. The Corvette was speeding out of control, the engine roaring as it hurtled down the road. Chris's heart raced as he tried to think of a way to regain control of the car. He swerved left and right, trying to avoid other vehicles, but it was too late. The car was moving too fast, and Chris knew that it was only a matter of time before disaster struck. He watched in horror as the Corvette careened off the road and flipped over and over, tossing him around like a rag doll. He could hear the crunch of the metal and the shatter of glass as the car crashed and tumbled. As the car finally came to a stop, Chris lay there, dazed and confused, trying to take stock of his injuries. He's alive? He was bruised and battered, his clothes torn and body aching, but it was the gash on his head that worried him the most. He could feel the blood dripping down his face, and he knew that he needed to get help as soon as possible. But as he tried to move, he felt his vision start to blur and his consciousness begin to fade. With a groan, Chris slumped to the ground, his head lolling to the side as he lost consciousness. He was barely aware of the sound of sirens in the distance, or the hands that lifted him gently onto a stretcher. Rachel sat at her desk, feeling a sense of frustration and anger wash over her. She was anxiously tapping her pen on her desk, lost in thought, staring at the new phone she got as a replacement for her old one. Still feeling a sense of annoyance that she was stupid enough to forget her phone in Chris's car, and even more stupid that she fell for him when Julie walked into her office uninvited. Okay, so if she got a new phone, if it's anything like my phone, the old phone would have cleared itself out. And I'm still confused as to how Chris got access to the phone, because it would have been locked. But anyway. As Julie approached, Rachel glared at her, her eyes narrowed in anger. "I told you not to disturb me," she snapped, her voice dripping with annoyance. "Hey, Emless, what's up? You're just in time for us to finish this book." Julie recoiled, taken aback by Rachel's sudden outburst. "I'm sorry, Rachel, I didn't mean to," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to let you know Mr. Thompson is on the line for you. He said it was urgent." "Get out!" Rachel let out a sigh of frustration. As Julie left the room, Rachel sat back in her chair, feeling a sense of exhaustion wash over her. Just as she was lost in thought, her new phone rang. Rachel picked it up immediately, her heart racing as she answered. "Hello?" she asked, her voice laced with anxiety. "Rachel, it's me," a familiar voice said on the other end of the line. "I just wanted to let you know that everything is taken care of. You don't have to worry about Chris anymore." She buried her face with her hand. She was about to cry and have a nervous breakdown. "Emily, this has gone too far. I am scared." Okay, so I thought that was going to be a guy, but it was actually Emily. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of Honest Deceit Part 1. So not only is Rachel in on it, so is Emily. And if you remember, Emily was Donnie's partner in the company. So we don't know much about Mike. And the thing that's confusing me right now, if I'm going to be honest, is that Donnie got the threatening stuff and the beating from Mike, and then later said, "I want to give everything to Rachel," right? She's the only one I trust. I can understand that move making Emily really mad and upset, because she's like, "Hello, I own part of this company." So then, how did she get involved in the whole thing? Like, was she just roped in there afterwards? Was she in on it all along? That part doesn't make sense to me. But if anyone wants to check out the other books, !honest, you are welcome to do so. I appreciate the fact that I was able to read this. There are a few issues with this book that we've talked about. That's, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I want this book to be successful. I want it to be a good story, but there are a few areas that need some help. And like I said earlier, I've passed that information on. I want nothing. Oops, I dropped my bookmark. I want nothing but the best for the author and for anyone that's worked on this book. Absolutely. I know what it's like to try and write a book. It's not easy. So if you are going to pick up this book and maybe, the other books in the series, just be aware that there's possibly in the other books some continued oopses that may need correcting. So, but apart from that, it's an intriguing story and I hope it does well. So there you have it. Honest Deceit Part 1. And we finished about normal time too, so not bad. It's a bummer that the author wasn't able to join us, or the lady that I was talking to, which I believe helped with some of the editing and the work of the book, but it is what it is. Moving forward, so on Thursday, Kay, who is here and has been a diligent part of this stream ever since, well, how long has it been? How long was it? Sadly, I can't fizz the puzzle on phone now because internet being dumb. No worries. You guys are really close to finishing it as it is, so, and it'll stay up. Even though the stream's coming to an end, the puzzle will remain, so. I don't remember how long it was, but anyway, Kay, you've been in the stream ever since, and you stayed, and I can't thank you enough for that, which is why I'm excited to get back into one of your books. And stay tuned, because when we start this book on Thursday, my scenes are going to look very different. I have something planned for this book and how my whole setup is done. So that'll be exciting, assuming I can pull it off. They said this one was spicy, right? Yes. Oh, mommy. So there you go. All right. Let me see who we can raid. So many people on right now. Off to bed, y'all. Good night. Good night, Kay. Can't wait to see you on Thursday. Starting your book. It's exciting. It's gonna be awesome. Who do we want to go say hi to? I'm glad you're excited. You should be. You're a great writer and you've done a lot of good work, so I look forward to digging into it. Who do we want to raid right now? What's Mr. Carrington up to? I know we raid Mr. Carrington. Whoa, that was loud. We raid him quite a lot. Oh, he's doing Jackbox party games, of course. But then we've also got Quincy. She's playing Palia. We've got Carly, who's doing Hunt Showdown. Killa is also doing Hunt Showdown. You know, we haven't raided Killabyte in ages. I know she's not reading a book or anything like that, but she's a sweet person. We're gonna go say hi to her. So thank you for being here. We made it to the end of the book. And Thursday, starts a whole new one. So the puzzle will remain until Thursday. So if you want to keep doing the puzzle, knock yourself out, enjoy that. But otherwise, have a great start to your week, whatever that involves. And I'll see you on Thursday, if I don't see you before. So I'm sure I'll see some of you in other people's streams, like usual. Good night to you, sir, Mr. Rhino. Take care. Good night, Locust. I hope you all have a great time. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have a wonderful night.